daughter of Mary Ann. And today, Deborah, daughter of Francis, will introduce her.
I don't want to do what that means. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce this fabulous lady to you, who is, how many glass ceilings did you break? A bunch of them. And something I've realized that I'm fortunate to say Carter and I have in common, we have spent a lifetime fighting for women, and we have a lifetime. And when you've been doing it a lifetime, sometimes you get, some days are very discouraging, they are. Some days when it doesn't go quite right, you think, I'm getting out of this, that's it, I'm done, let it go. And then you see something that just lifts your spirit again. You say, all right, I'm off fighting one more time. Anyway, the Reverend Dr. Carter Heyward broke 2 glass ceilings in 1974, July 29th to be exact, in Philadelphia. The Philadelphia 11 were ordained. Church wasn't happy about it, but they were ordained, 11 women. 2 years later, the church said, oh, I think we ought to be all inclusive. Keep in mind, I'm a good Presbyterian at the time. I had not become an Episcopalian yet. So that, and plus, Carter also broke at that time. She was openly gay and broke that glass ceiling at the same time. I salute you for that. I think this lady is tremendous. Listen to her, have questions for her, because she will answer them. Take it away, Carter.
Well, Deborah, that is a very gracious introduction, and dear people, this is such a beautiful, beautiful church. The people I've met clearly, and also the space we're in, and this gorgeous tree through the window here, more gorgeous than any stained glass I've ever seen. And it's just so alive. So thank you for having me come. And I may just wind up wandering all over the place in what I'm going to say for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then open it up to you and try to respond to what you might be more interested in. I'll tell you a little bit about how the Philadelphia ordination happened, because that's usually something people want to know.
She is using the microphone. Maybe a little closer.
Well, I can also use the hand one.
I'll turn it up a little bit.
This is always a challenge. So I can use the handheld mic if I need to.
That would probably be best.
He's turning it
If you can get it off.
He's turning it on the wall.
See, try now.
Okay, how's that? All right, how, Yes, okay, and I'm gonna take this off. And I don't have to worry about dropping this little box. Thank you.
That's
So maybe I'll stand up, just because I can see people better, and you can probably hear me a little bit better if you can see my mouth move. Okay, I need to speak right into this. Okay, I should know this because every Monday, Sue and I live outside Brevard, North Carolina, up the mountains, and every Monday afternoon we have what is called Moral Monday, where we, and sometimes 10, sometimes 100, sometimes 200 others gather with various signs and brief speeches about the state of the world around us and calling people to, to do something, to take whatever action people can do to help make justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream, as the prophet says. So I should be used to the mic because we have to almost eat it at Moral Monday just like this. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Philadelphia ordination, what led to it, and then when Will and I were talking about today, we were talking about a book that I wrote several years ago. In fact, 2001 is when I wrote it. It was published in 2021, in response to the January 6th insurrection, and it's called the 7 Deadly Sins of White Christian Nationalism. And he said, oh, I think people would like to hear about that. Well, we can't do but so much. So let me just tell you a little bit about the Philadelphia ordination, and then if you want me to say anything about the 7 Deadly Sins of White Christian Nationalism, I'll be happy to do that too. Basically, the Philadelphia ordination was a product of a buildup in the Episcopal Church as elsewhere in the society among not only women, but our male allies, other deacons, priests, bishops, people who really knew that it was time for women to be heard and seen and have a voice in a new way inside the church as well as throughout the society. And so, after the General Convention of the church had turned down women's ordination twice in 1970 and 1973, Bishop Robert DeWitt of Pennsylvania and the Reverend Sue Hyatt, who was a deacon in the Diocese of Pennsylvania, came together and said, you know, we should just do an ordination and just quit asking the church's permission because it's going to get worse and not better. Sue Hyatt was a social worker as well as eventually a priest, but she was a community organizer, and she could kind of read the signs of the times, which is that there was a push against feminism going on. It had really begun in the early 70s, and you may remember the name Phyllis Schlafly. People like that were on the move and were beginning to win victories, as they did with the ERA, as you may recall, which was defeated. Well, still alive, but did not become law. So we decided we've got to do something. And Sue Hyatt was a very dear friend of mine. She and I had been part of the Women's Caucus together. So we gathered 9 other women, basically, the 2 of us and 9 others out of 40 women deacons who at that time had been ordained deacons, who did not, for a variety of reasons, either they were not qualified to be priests, they had never studied to be priests, they were perpetual deacons, which is fine, or they weren't ready in terms of having been tested and accepted fully by dioceses and standing committees. But of those who were eligible, 11 of us surfaced to be ordained in Philadelphia in July of 1974. And so 4 bishops wound up being there. 3 had planned to, the 4th showed up. Tony Ramos, the Bishop of Costa Rica, showed up. He had been a classmate in seminary of Sue Hyatt's, and so this was a personal connection with one of us. The 4 bishops were there, and it turned out 2,000 or 3,000 people showed up at the Church of the Advocate in North Philadelphia, and the ordination took place. And one of the wittier moments of the day, because it was filled with tension and we had bodyguards. I mean, it was unbelievable, the kinds of threats that had come to the bishops, to us, and to the congregation. So they had dogs sniffing for bombs, and the Philadelphia police and the Black Panthers and the radical lesbians were all together, forming really a circle around the church to make sure that nothing happened. And it was a great kind of triumvirate of forces, because it's probably the first and the last time that particular group of people, the radical lesbians, the Black Panthers, and the Philadelphia police came together to cooperate. But they did a great job keeping us safe. And other than the fact that we were all white middle-class women, there was a fair amount of diversity among us in terms of both age and the kind of what we often called churchmanship, higher or lower, more evangelical, more Anglo-Catholic. We were all sorts and in between. And it was a great day. And the blowback was immediate. The presiding bishop at the time was very opposed to women's ordination. He called a meeting of the House of Bishops. They immediately declared us invalid. And we just said no. You know, we had been validly ordained. All the elements were present, including being the right substance and matter as women. I mean, that was even being debated, you know. That's from Thomas Aquinas. Can women, how fully human are women? period, you know, and the maleness of Christ being essential to the priesthood and all of this stuff theologically was being said. So we were having to contend with that. And when I say we, I don't mean just the 11 women or the 4 bishops, but all Episcopalians who had been there or people all over the nation that were standing with us and therefore with women, as Deborah has said. And so a year later, 4 more women were ordained in Washington, D.C. by another bishop, another brave bishop. The Washington 4, as they were called, joined the Philadelphia 11. So then we were 15 irregular priests. We were fine being irregular. We said that does not bother us because we are. And to this day, I would say I'm an irregular priest. That's not an insult. It was a description. But we did keep going wherever people would have us. So there was a lot of house church ministry going into people's homes in dioceses that would not welcome us. The Diocese of South Carolina was definitely such a diocese at the time, totally opposed to women's ordination in general and to our ordination in particular. Things have changed radically and beautifully in this diocese. And I consider your Bishop Ruth one of my dear friends now. And in fact, it's through her that Father Will and I met at the Diocesan Convention, where several of you were last November as well. And so this is a great shining star diocese at this point, not only for women, but on issues of race and other important matters. A diocese that people who live here can be proud of, and I trust you are. So why don't I stop there in terms of the Philadelphia ordination and see what questions, if any, you may have about that, or if you'd like to move on into the 7 deadly sins of Christian nationalism. Yes.
Talk a little bit about how difficult it was after your ordination to find work or reward.
Yes, the question is, how difficult was it for us to find work after the ordination? Well, very difficult in the sense that for the next 2 years, nobody official would have us do anything. That is, we couldn't. Most parishes were forbidden by their bishops to have us do anything. Some parishes forbade us to come as lay people into worship, but all parishes forbade us to come as priests. There were outstanding priests, that is to say priests standing outside the official system who had us come and do things, but they would often be the people who would help lay people organize the house churches. So we would go into a house and have a wonderful, so usually a potluck of some kind and a Eucharist and whatever. But we did not get jobs within the church, except for the fact that Sue Hyatt and myself, 2 of us, did get hired by the Episcopal Divinity School in Cambridge, Mass., which most of the faculty of the Episcopal Divinity School had participated in the Philadelphia ordination, and they specifically wanted women from that ordination to be on the faculty because they were increasingly having women students apply and women students who wanted to be ordained come to the seminary. So I lucked out. I had already, before the ordination, I had begun working on my doctorate in theology, and Sue Hyatt was already trained in pastoral theology. And so in theology and pastoral theology, we got to go to the Episcopal Divinity School, where I stayed for the next 30 years. And Sue stayed until she died in 2002 in her 60s, very sadly. Others, over the next, did somebody say?
Bill is trying to
No, I'm sorry.
Oh no, let me just finish this. The others, eventually, I'd say over 3 or 4 years, did manage to land, certainly once women's ordination passed in 1976, officially at the General Convention. Then we were all recognized by our own bishops. And once we became legal, people could begin to get jobs. And of the 11 of us, of the 15 of us, I'd say maybe 4 people got jobs in parishes, eventually as rectors. Others got jobs in hospice work, hospital work, chaplaincy work. Others were teaching in other seminaries. Talked to one woman who was here named Laura, who had been to Yale, Divinity School, and Lee McGee from the Washington Ordination was one of her professors, so things like that. So we did, I think everyone who won, and Marie Moorfield from North Carolina became canon to the ordinary of Michael Curry when he was Bishop of North Carolina. So eventually we began to really be absorbed into the structures of the church to the extent that we could, to the extent that we wanted to be. So, yes, Bill?
Well, Bishop Ruth recommended your book, Seven Deadly Sins of White Christian Nationalism, for Lenten reading last year. Some of us read it. And for those of us who did not, I wonder if there's anything you'd like to say about white Christian nationalism.
Yes, I'll be glad to, yes.
Well, before you go to the next, we're looking for an assistant priesthood. So do you have any advice for me or for this congregation and how to support and welcome a female assistant director?
Well, I wish I had somebody in my back pocket to just hand to you. How far along in the process are you?
We've been waiting 4 years.
4 years.
We're ready.
So, no candidates. How interesting. So what about Bishop Ruth? I mean, I'm sure she must be.
She's taking our assistance.
She's taken your assistance, you mean, and Well, we'll talk about this later, okay? Because it might be that if we put our heads together, I can come up with some pointers. I can't off the top of my head because I've been out of it so long in terms of who's coming out of seminary or who are the younger people or which priests are looking for new placements or whatever. But they're out there.
But I think just the ways that you found support in the past, from churches and how that's increased your ministry.
Well, for sure, it has to do with lay, not just, I'm going to say lay women, but I don't want men to hear that as in some way letting guys off the hook. I mean, it's really everybody. It's got to be very supported by women and men in the congregation. And I had a younger woman student of mine who's no longer a younger woman. She's a priest in her 60s now, and she's married to another woman priest. But when they took a parish on Cape Cod about 10 years ago, they had a baby boy that they had adopted. And one of the people in the parish was very unhappy that they had the two women came, for starters, and that they had this little boy with them, and they had to figure out how to help the family deal with the little boy. And one of the people in the vestry, a man on the vestry, actually said to these two women, what we really wanted here was a real family. Now that, and people don't understand how insulting something like that is. I mean, I can tell you understand it, but that's the kind of thing. It's like what we really wanted was a man and a woman and 2.5 children. That's the real family. But these two women and a baby boy is not a family. So obviously, I think I gather everything I know about you, Will, and about this diocese, and have sensed with these people here today, you beautiful people, is that you would provide an immensely welcoming congregation for a woman to be part of, a woman priest to join, and I would certainly support that. I will tell you that I myself have a hard time. I said to my partner, Sue, out in the parking lot between the service and this, that one of my difficulties as a not just as a woman priest, but as a Christian, is with liturgy. Right after the ordination, when we got hired at the Episcopal Divinity School, when Sue Hine and I were there, we spent our 30 or 40 years on the faculty working on inclusive liturgies, trying very hard to move away from the totally patriarchal shape of liturgy, because we really do believe that God needs to be lifted up as female as well as male. It's not either or, it's a both and. And the shape of our liturgy does not allow that if we follow too closely to what has always been the way. I said to Sue, when we came to the service, I said, and I mean this as a compliment, this is without a doubt the most beautiful traditional liturgy I have been to in recent memory, maybe ever, to be honest. This is just gorgeous, not only the space, which I just love, but Father Will, your presence and the music, and I mean, this was beautiful. And I will always be grateful that I was able to be here. But if I were working in a parish, I would absolutely insist upon an opening up of female imagery in liturgy. And that will be something I think you'll probably need to talk with any woman who comes here about. Maybe men too, but certainly women, because I think most women who have been educated in recent times have misgivings about the liturgy for that reason. And please do not be insulted by that, because we are who we are and we're all part of a tradition, and that's an important.
Have you used the New Zealand prayer book?
Yes, the New Zealand prayer book's very helpful, and the New Zealand Lord's Prayer is beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, and there's so many. I mean, Stephanie Spellers, who works in the National Church, she's got access to any number of liturgies that can be used by parishes. And I don't know, Ruth and I have not talked about this, but I would assume that as a bishop, she would be very open to churches, particularly churches that are this wonderful, opening up a service.
1 year Compline.
Yeah.
In one Lent season, I think we did it at Compline, and that was my opening to the.
How was it?
Yeah.
We go back to those questions.
Yes, the 7 deadly sins. Well, I wrote the 7 deadly sins right after the insurrection at the Capitol. And three women friends of mine who are writers and I talked for about 6 months about the need for Christians, moderate, liberal, progressive Christians, to speak up and say something, since our more conservative, politically conservative Christian siblings were among those, some of them were among those who launched the attack. And as we know today, it's gotten even more polarized with sort of Christians on the political right who have a voice right now, a loud public voice in our nation. And then there are the rest of us. So we decided it's the rest of us who need to speak up here, because we're not going to have our Christianity stolen from us. I mean, this is, you know, I like Bishop Curry's phrase, the Jesus people. You know, we are a Jesus movement. We're the people of Jesus. We are not the people of some US president. We are not the people of some political party. We are the people of Jesus of Nazareth. And that transcends politics, but unfortunately, it also has to infuse how we vote and what we think about and how we analyze economic injustice, racial injustice, gender injustice, sexual injustice, so that our faith does affect our politics. And even though Christians, I think a case can be made that Christians shouldn't become political movements on behalf of particular candidates, at least not in normal situations, that we have to speak out politically on issues, on immigration. It's a very, you know, right in our face today. I mean, as many churches are saying, you know, Jesus was a refugee. What is the Christian response? I mean, the Jesus people's response to having our neighbors gathered up and sent away or killed, as the man in Houston was the other day? I mean, what do people like us have to say about that or do about that? So that was the impetus behind the 7 deadly sins of white Christian nationalism. And the first of the sins is omnipotence. And I say that because I think God, rather than being seen as somehow over us or sort of all-powerful up here somehow, I believe that God is all-loving. And that if love is power, that changes the definition of omnipotence. So that if we think of power as something over us, whether it's religious power or political power, I think we're in trouble. I think we need to, Dorothea Zola, fabulous German theologian who died in 2003, she once said, God cannot be all-powerful and all-loving unless we redefine power as love. If we redefine power as love, then yes, God can be all-powerful, all-loving. How does the church help teach and preach that? How do we Christian people help teach and preach and live that? So the first sin is omnipotence, is traditionally defined as power over. Second sin is entitlement, believing that that somehow we are the best, sometimes even the only that are good, whether it's as Christians or as white people or as Americans or whatever category we're talking about. If we see ourselves as above all others and therefore as entitled to certain benefits that other people don't have, this is another deadly sin. I call those first two deadly sins sins of the spirit, because they're not just about, it's not about Christianity at all. It's about being human. It's about how our insecure minds reach for things that are higher up to hold on to and to latch on to. The next 5 sins are substantive sins. White supremacy is one. Misogyny and homophobia are the next one. They go hand in hand. The one that people always want to talk about is capitalist spirituality. That's not an anti-capitalism per se. It's an anti-capitalism run amok, anti-capitalism that is just for me and not for you. It gets back to entitlement and omnipotence, wanting to have it all, wanting to have most, wanting to be best. When capitalism leads in that direction, we have a problem, right? If it can be designed in such a way that everybody really does have their boats lifted and everybody really does stand a chance, then we're talking about what I think Robert Reich, the economist, calls democratic capitalism. We don't have democratic capitalism right now. Because our democracy is so under assault. In democratic capitalism, we would not have greater and greater numbers of unhoused people. We would not have these detention camps that none of us can get into to check the conditions of and so forth. So, white supremacy, male gender superiority, misogyny, capitalist spirituality, domination of the earth by people who put ourselves at the center of it and don't regard the earth itself as our partner in creation and in whatever decisions we make. And then finally, violence of all kinds. The book has been criticized that I didn't single out gun violence as one of the deadly sins of Americans. Certainly could have, but also just plain violence. I mean, look at what's going on in Iran right now that need not be going on. Anyhow, so those are the 7 deadly sins, and at the end of each chapter, there are all these things for parishes to talk about. Questions, for example, Bible studies, because the Bible directly or indirectly addresses every one of these. And if you really want to know where the Bible will always take us, if we're reading it carefully, it'll take us to economic justice, because that's the one thing that's really completely indisputable about the ministry of Jesus, was that he advocated for the poor and did not believe that poverty was a godly structure, that we can always do something about the poor among us. And it's not just taking them things to eat at Thanksgiving, it is helping to change the structures of our society so that the poor are diminished as a population and become more and more able to live life, the kind of life that any of us would choose if we can. So that's what the book's about, and unfortunately it's gotten only more timely since it was written, and it's still out there. Yes?
I don't feel that the Episcopal Church is saying enough, like doing enough. I think that the Episcopal Church, both locally and nationally, is not speaking out on these issues that you just have defined.
Well,
Sean Rose certainly has spoken out.
did you all hear what these 2 sisters said here?
No.
Remind me of your name again. Nancy. Nancy said she doesn't feel like the Episcopal Church is doing enough, either locally or nationally. And Deb said the presiding bishop has certainly spoken out. You know, and this is where the presiding bishop, Sean Rowe, she says she disagrees. I don't know whether you all have discussed this as a congregation or not, and Sue and I are both very impressed driving into this church today with the various ministries that seem to be signaled and how they may be connected to the church. I don't know how they are, but it looks like this church is doing a good deal. But on these issues around, I know that this diocese has been trying for a long time to do something about white supremacy. I do know that because, now whether or not it's succeeding, I don't know. But I know that the bishop is very concerned, and I know Father Will is concerned, and I don't know what kind of activities or lack thereof have been taken here. I agree, let me not talk about this diocese, let me just talk about the church in general, the liberal church. I think we fool ourselves at believing that somehow not to take public stands against one thing or another is to somehow keep everything sort of easier to deal with, not be driving people away. I think what drives people away from church is lack of candor, a lack of clarity about what we stand for. I often go to a Unitarian church in Brevard, and the pastor there said, about a year ago, he said, you know, because he was asked the same kind of question about why when you say something from the pulpit that may make people angry about one thing or another, why do you do that? And he said, well, what I try to do is make clear what this parish stands for and that everybody is welcome, but you do need to know what we stand for. And if you decide this is not for you, then perhaps it's not. We're not trying to keep you hostage here, but neither are we trying to placate and please everybody. We're trying to preach the gospel. We're trying to do what we believe Jesus would have us do. And if you don't like it, I'm happy to spend time with you and to talk about it and to listen to what you have to say. And maybe I don't say things too graciously. Maybe I need to change my style. I mean, I think preachers can learn a lot about how to connect, how to relate. And but I do think we need to be really clear about what we believe, and then let people decide if they want to be in our presence. And in talking with any number of friends that I have who are bishops or who are rectors and priests, I know this is something, it's an issue that everybody shares and wonders about and wrestles with. I mean, those who are conscientious, who would share some of maybe your entire perspective, wrestle with that. So I think that people are not being passive in relationship to these questions. But I do think we're at an urgent moment in our history right now. And I don't think that we can afford to sit by for the next 3 or 4 months and not have things said by Christian leaders, moderate, liberal, and progressive Christian leaders, however they or we manage to say it.
I think this is really interesting and rewarding. I'm wondering, first, you have a podcast, but also, do you have any suggestions on how everyday people who believe what you believe, but who have family members and good friends who are on the opposite side, and you've been in, have been in the position of just not discussing because it would ruin the relationship. And that's certainly not helpful overall.
Oh, it's not. You know, we are really blessed, and we are really lucky when it can be a longer term project. In other words, if you've got a child or a cousin or an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent or a spouse even, or someone that's close to you where you find yourselves really on opposite sides of important issues, if you can sort of work on it together, if both or all parties say, well, yeah, we're gonna wrestle with this, then that is a very good thing. And out of that will come new learnings for everyone, and rather than alienation. where anybody simply refuses to engage. That's a challenge. And all I can do is say as a not just as a Christian priest, but as a human being, is that we got to do what we got to do, what our values really lead us toward. And I think what Jesus would say, two things: always leave a place open at the table. Don't ever shut the door and say, don't you ever come back here again, I never want to see your face. There's got to be an opening there for people to come back and join the circle. That's communion at its best, so that we can all be together regardless of what we may believe or think we believe. But to leave that open seat and hope and pray that the people we care about will come back and fill those seats. And then one of my favorite verses from of Jesus is move on and shake the dust from your feet and don't worry about the people. It's way easier if it's people we don't know very well. It's way easier to be in a conversation with somebody who basically tells us to go to hell if we don't really care about that person. If it is my sister, which it's not in my case, but it could be, that would be a very hard thing. But even she and I wish she were here because she's at the beach with me, but she's not here this morning. I really, except for my beloved partner, I didn't encourage anybody else to come with me because we'd be having all kinds of arguments about everything, not about politics, but about religion, interestingly enough, because we're all over the place in terms of religion. But once upon a time, my sister was part of an organization that thought that gay people were bound to hell. And she didn't, at the time she had 2 little children, and she didn't want them around me. And my parents, who were alive at the time, and my brother, who was alive at the time, and myself, all had to just agree that we needed to just back off, not ostracize her and her husband, but just keep on being who we were and hope and pray that in time she would find her way back. And she did. Now that particular story has a happy ending, and her children are now here at the beach too, and they are like second children to Sue and me. I mean, they are wonderful parts of the family, and they love who we are. They love who we are together. So our sexuality is no longer an issue in the family, but it was. My ordination was not an issue in the family. In fact, I have a great story to tell you about that. It's not about the ordination, but it's about when I was ordained a deacon, which was legal, and nobody objected to that. It was the year before I was ordained a priest, and my grandmother and parents came from Charlotte to the Diocese of New York, to the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, which is where it happened. And they were in this huge crowd of people because there were like 8 of us being ordained deacons. And so that happened, and it was all with a lot of fanfare, and it was fun, and that was in June of '73. And in fact, 2 stories came out of that, both of which you would love. One was that my father, who was there, he was a salesman with Esso, or Exxon, I forget which it was at the time. Anyhow, he went back to his, he said at the reception for my ordination, he said he held up a picture of Secretariat, the great racehorse who had just won the Triple Crown, June of '73. And he said, this horse here, he said, I want to make a toast to my daughter because this horse here reminds me a lot of Carter. And I thought, oh dear, where is this going? We were all sipping champagne at the time. And he said, I said to the fellows back at the office that my daughter reminds me of the racehorse Secretariat. He said, you know, some horses are meant to breed and some horses are meant to run. And he said, Carter is meant to run. And that was kind of a backhanded way of him saying, I know who you are and I think it's great. You're meant to run, you're not meant to breed. Well, later Daddy and I would have many conversations, and he understood it was not an either or, either with Secretariat or theoretically with me. But anyhow, that was a father's love. I mean, it was really lovely. And the other story is about my grandmother who came to the ordination. That Christmas, I went home on my own by myself, and my grandmother said, "Where is your husband?" And I said, "Husband, Nana? I'm not married. I don't have a husband." She said, "Well, yes, you are." She said, "I went to your wedding in New York." And I said, "Well, who did I marry?" She said, "You married the man with that big pointed hat." So, family relations. Yes.
Here in Georgetown County, ICE raids are taking place. I know for sure about two men who were picked up getting gas in their car. They have been residents here for 30 years. They have families here. They were picked up and they are in Georgia in jail. It remains under the radar. You don't hear anything about it. And I'm sure this is not an isolated case, and I'm also sure that Georgetown County is not an isolated case. How do you raise awareness? The person was shot in Texas, so that's
Yes.
getting attention. But this is going on. Thousands of people are being.
I know. I think it's evil. I mean, there's truly something evil at work among us. I'm sure there must be somewhere in this area an advocacy group for immigrants and for the Hispanic community. In Brevard, we have the NAACP, and it has a subsection a human rights subsection that is working day and night with the Hispanic community to track such things as that and to keep and to make sure that such people are followed, and that at the very least you know where they are and who they are, and whatever family they may have left behind you can get with and minister to. But I mean,
Yeah, the feeling also, even the family feels embarrassed, they don't know what to do. I may be wrong about it, but.
well, I would think,
It's just in secrecy,
yes.
they feel embarrassed about it.
I think that if, again, I don't know this county, and I don't know I don't know what the church may be doing. And by the church, I mean now the diocese, not so much the local church, because I think groups of churches can come together and have their immigration task forces working in solidarity with Hispanic communities, making sure that there's somebody somewhere who's bilingual, for example, who can speak, who can translate and interpret back and forth. I would think, again, that there'd be something in this area, the coastal area, Myrtle Beach, Charleston, and in between, that some organizations are bound to be, I'll say this in a spirit of both, a positive spirit of hope, somebody knows what's going on. But I think that's the research that needs to be done, because you're right. I mean, at least you know that these two people were taken, and it's evil, and we need to do whatever we can. Yes.
To answer Dale, St. Cyprian's used to have a very active Hispanic ministry, but I don't know if they are still active. But they have a very strong Hispanic ministry.
St. Cyprian's in Georgetown had an active Hispanic ministry. Yes.
Question about propaganda. And it seems like we're having more and more difficulty pushing back on that in both the local and the greater country media.
Yes. This business about news and fake news and I think what we're all up against right now is knowing what is real and what is true and what is actually generated by groups like this, and what would be said we have generated by somebody who has some kind of an ulterior motive to explain what was happening in this church today, that suddenly is out there, and who knows what to believe about this conversation, for example. I think we're all in that quandary, and we just have to try to do whatever we can to communicate with each other in circles that we do trust. And this is one of the great things that can happen in churches, I think, is that people can be in groups smaller than this even, but 10 circles in a church of this size of people who are talking to each other about what's what and what can we do. and knowing which sources to believe. I mean, I don't believe anything absolutely anymore that I read in the newspaper, even the newspapers and journals that I tend to trust, that I go to on a regular basis. I don't assume that everything I'm reading is true, because you really don't know where it's coming from to the newspaper. But I do need people to talk with about it. I need people to challenge my interpretation, to let me know if I've gone down a rabbit hole of conspiracy, for example, wondering about one thing or another. So it's being careful what our sources are, having people to talk to that you really can trust, that you know and trust. Just sort of, the great bumper sticker about the big national deficit is critical consciousness, or critical thinking. We do need to learn how to think critically, all of us. And that's behind your question, is how can we think critically? And I think that is a super important question, and I can only say we can't do it alone. We have to have people that help us do it, because all of us can go down rabbit holes without realizing it. And, but, if we keep our minds set on justice for people like these immigrants who are being picked up, for people of color, for women, for gays and lesbians and trans people, for the earth, and none of us can do it all. If each of us just has one particular passion that we are going to follow, that we're going to really try to find out what is true about, that would be a great basis for having a group of people to share. I'm going to tell you everything I can about what's happening with women, or you're going to tell me everything you can about what's happening with the environment right now on this coast, things like that, and we'll figure out what's true and what's not. Yes, back here and then right here.
Something very simple. I'm in a big Bible study family, and we've been discussing this. Christ always supported women, and women supported him. They were with him in every event.
You're saying Trump?
Christ.
Oh.
I'm speaking to him.
Christ, yes.
Right. Christ was a true supporter.
I'm glad I misheard that. Yes, no, we won't, but
They were with him always, and at the end, the women were the ones who were with him.
and why do we, she's saying Christ always supported women, and women were the ones who were with him right to the end and through the end. Right, yes. Why? Do you want to, anybody want to take a crack at why you think that was the case? Why women followed him? So that Christ,
To put it simply, Christ supported and was always supported by women. They were a great part of his life and everything that he did in the temple, and when he was crucified, who were there? The women. And when he rose
do you want to give us a sense of why you think that might have been the case? Would you?
Yes, because it's in the Bible, and I think
Yes, I agree with you. I'm not arguing with what you've said, but why would women have been drawn to Christ, and why would Christ have been drawn to women? That's
Christ was
kind.
and understanding.
Yeah, and I believe that Jesus of Nazareth knew that real power is love, and that love is power. I mean, and that I think that women might have been the first to recognize that too. I think that people sort of on the bottom of the hierarchy tend to be the first to understand what's happening when it comes to power and love, and that it would be very refreshing to be in a very patriarchal society and have somebody like Jesus come along, who's not lauding it over people, but rather is befriending, and is calling people his friends, and is not making a big deal about his own power, and is a humble human being. And if we see God in Jesus, it's through that humility, through that capacity to love, not through some power over business. Jesus is here with us now, insofar as Jesus is. And I think that was true then too. And I think women, yes, women would have followed him. I think people who, I think the poor, as we know, the poor followed him. Marginalized people followed him. And it's been that way from the beginning, and it still is that way today. So we may be running to the end of our time. I'm not sure, but I think we probably are. Are we? Okay. So maybe one more comment, or yes.
I just think it's so interesting and prophetic that you're here on the same day that Lindsey Graham died. And it was probably way inappropriate for me to say that, but you do have to kind of wonder about that.
Did everybody get that? Yes, whoops, this is still on? No. Okay, I will make one response to that, and then that will be all I can do today. But I think it's interesting you bring up Lindsey Graham, because that was the first thing I saw this morning when I woke up. And it makes me want to weep. I mean, I would never have agreed probably on anything with Lindsey Graham. I mean, we would have been politically polar opposites. But I think he was a very sad man. There's something profoundly sad to me about Lindsey Graham. And so I can be angry. I'm not glad he died. You know, that would not be true, but it makes me sad that I think he was a sad man. And I hope he rests in peace. That would be my wish and prayer for Lindsey Graham, that he rests in peace, because I don't think he had much of it inside himself. That, I really, yes.
Let me just say one thing. Voting is the answer.
Voting is the answer, yes.
And I think too many people, particularly as we get older, can't be bothered. The line is too long, I haven't really kept up, or feeling particularly in this state that it doesn't matter because it's such a conservative state. But it does matter.
It does matter. It matters that everybody vote. That everybody vote, and yes, it matters a great deal. It matters a great deal, and thank you. Tell me your name again? Dory and I had the shared experience as girls of being furious that we could not be acolytes. She was in the north, I was in the south, we could not be acolytes. Full circle. Here we are. Thank you very much.